Welcome, creatives, community, and kind folks, to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and of course, all of you that are able to take part in this show, live or not, or checking in later on, are the co-hosts of this show. And we are going to continue our discussion about the OSR versus Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and its various iterations from the past until now. And we're just going to talk about game balance. I was able to find one, although this has been referred to a number of times, again in our tabletop role-playing forums, our community. Some things come around in cycles, like seasons of such, and one of those is about game balance. And I'm trying to relate to you guys some reasons why the OSR, O standing for old or original, the S standing for school, like as in old school, old systems, and then the R standing for anything from Renaissance to revival to rules. Why there is a drawback to these systems, especially after what Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro and Dungeons and Dragons trademark has done to the community. And why games like Knave and Shadow Dark and Maze Rats and ICRPG and so many of these other rules light adjacent Dungeons and Dragons style fantasy games are drawing so much attention. And one of these is, like I have the question below, game balance is an illusion? All right. In terms of game balance, there are different ways people look at game balance. And one of those directions of looking at game balance is player to player. And often game balance can be, when it comes to player, can be described as one player's choices in terms of creating a character and having an impact on the story has less influence or impact or agency than another player, and oftentimes that's expressed in modern parlance as doing the most damage. So for example, whatever the rules are in the game in a modern context that allows a player to succeed, to move forward, if it boils down to just doing the most damage, the players who do less damage feel like they are less powerful, that there's an imbalance in terms of effectiveness. And so when it comes to indie games, a lot of times they are designed in such a way that it's not really about doing harm or damage, but how much they can influence the path of the game, and do so in a recognized, organized rule set that allows them to impact the game in other ways than just doing damage. And therefore, the balance issue doesn't come about. Now, also, we got to remember that you really can't design a game around individuals' personalities. So, for example, if you have a gaming table where a game master, dungeon master, storyteller, flame tender, whoever, gives more spotlight to one person or group of people than another, there isn't a rule or game in existence that's going to solve that problem. It's just going to feel like one person is more effective than another because they're getting more of the spotlight. There's more attention drawn to them, and that's more of a social issue. There's no game that's going to solve that. Another way of how we may unconsciously feel how game balance is resolved is a more modern take on video games, and essentially video games, but board games also count, card games, in which there's a presumed outcome based on character ability. And I'm going to give you an example about this. So in a video game, oftentimes video games start out with low encounter strength, and then it is balanced based on the more powerful the character gets, the harder the levels get. I remember playing old games in the arcade and you'd start out with one starfighter, and you're fighting maybe 20 alien ships that aren't moving very fast. And over time, I get power-ups, and I get a second starship that works with my first starship, and then I get a force field, and I get these things, and guess what? The aliens start getting more numerous. They get faster. It's harder. It's like playing Tetris or many video games where it starts out slow based on character or player ability, and as the player gets better, and then the game gets tougher, and you get more advantages, the enemies increase simultaneously in parity. And oftentimes that can be translated over into role-playing games, and the OSR doesn't care about that. So I present to you a type of game balance that puts all the responsibility in the player. As a matter of fact, and unfortunately I couldn't find this article, but I found something in tangentially to it. Actually found it on Wikipedia, and that is the OSR doesn't care about game balance. As a matter of fact, game balance is specifically the responsibility of the players, and I'm going to describe to you how imbalanced encounters happen all the time in OSR games, and how they are handled. And strangely enough, it's through common sense and context. Schooner says the only balance I use is allowing equal time for player turns, 30 seconds at most. Yeah, sometimes I don't know if I'm that specific, but I get it, right? Like this is another. We could talk about this whole other subject about like how long it takes a player to decide what they're going to do and when they do it and how they do it. But I've used some draconian methods in my day. Like I don't know if you guys ever remember old board games used to have these little small plastic sand timers. Not the tick 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 timers, but it was a little plastic, it's clear, and I don't even know if it was sand inside of. Reminded me of like salt or something. But anyway, you would just turn it over, and it had I presume, like you said, like 30 seconds, 60 seconds, something like that, 45-second timer on it. And yeah, we've used those. We've done the talking stick thing where you got to pass around the I don't know, the MacGuffin at the table, whether it was like dice or a mask or one of these little mini at the mall swords or something, to get people to talk. We used to have to write down. We used a method where you wrote down what your basic action was going to be, so you wouldn't keep changing your mind. It was all those kind of things. Yeah. Schooner says no one holds the spotlight that way. Well, my contention is there are very few rules that stop a-hole behavior. It doesn't matter, right? Like for your group, cool, sweet. I would not argue. Not whatever you got going on. If I'm part of your game, sweet. But you can't stop a-hole behavior. That's just not. You can't. A-hole's gonna A. Is that a thing? No, I get it. Yeah. I'm not arguing with you. I'm being funny. I'm being sarcastic. So the other methods of game balance, yes, in the OSR there were like if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, there's like hit dice and how tough a monster is and things like that. But we also had a number of random tables and adventure adventure things. I vet my players. Hell yeah, you gotta vet. Getting randos to show up at a table is pretty difficult. We're playing a very social, encountered game. If you're gonna bother, basically playing like tabletop role-playing games is the equivalent of like going to dinner parties with strangers, right? Like you kind of want to vet the people that are either coming to your house or you're having drinks with or whatnot. It's not. I don't know why sometimes we make different categories, but yeah, you gotta vet people. And sometimes just vetting people is just synergy. Like, how do you get along with these individuals? And are they do they have a compromising nature? Are they amicable to your you and everyone else's style of play? Like, hey, are we just loose and having fun? This is beer and pretzels. Are we very serious and we're gonna this dour, serious horror game? Are we thematically, with our behavior, our body language, our words that we use, are we involved in it? And so, yeah, vetting people is pretty cool. And if the vetting process doesn't need to be, I mean, you can do it with like questionnaires and things like that, but you don't need to. Sometimes it's just having a conversation with someone, and you can, sometimes you can, your instincts tell you when you hear certain words or the way things are said and performed, that you go, I don't think this is going to be a good fit. But yeah, so I think one of the things, along with video games, and especially video games, predicting for us what balance is in terms of each encounter, I also think that there's an expectation, especially with media. So some of our favorite media involves great big damn heroes who solve the problem, and that encounters are expected to be ones in which the players have the ability to stand up front to that encounter and defeat that encounter. Now, one mistake is that every encounter in modern gaming versus the OSR, one mistake is that every single encounter is with a monster that you can defeat. A second myth in modern gaming that has been created, that doesn't exist in the OSR, is that all actions are to be taken place in one location. That there are no references to past events or future encounters. I will explain that one. And I guess a last one would be, in modern parlance, that there's an expectation that you will win, that that you will come up against a situation in which in up-to-date current interaction, you will solve that situation. So let me explain how some things were done module-wise, how they were written in modules that we purchased, and how some of the gaming was performed in the OSR, and why there's this draw for some in the community today to go back to this old style gaming. So, imbalance. First of all, every encounter wasn't always an encounter that you could win in battle. Now, as hit points got larger and more of the game was focused on how much damage you could deal, then it became necessary to put more and more emphasis on fighting monsters, because players lacked any other ability to solve situations. Either they had an easy button to get them past, say, physical encounters or social encounters, or the mechanisms to relate to some of the other encounters, social encounters, economic encounters, political encounters, were cast aside or just made very easy. And so therefore damage dealing became the thing, so every encounter became a monster. But in OSR, every encounter wasn't always with a monster. Encounters would be physical exploration. How do we get across the raging river, or the deep crevice, or the accursed desert, or the blizzard-filled realm of the far north, or something? It might be even something simple as, oh wow, there are these swinging platforms over top of lava, and we have to jump from one platform to another, and we're carrying an unconscious NPC. We've got treasure on our backs. The ropes holding up the platforms are rotting away. What can we do to overcome this physical obstacle? Sometimes it was social obstacles, and in the OSR, all those things were always mixed together, and players had to be not just characters. Players had to be ingenious in how they handled it. So, morale and reaction rolls were very common and were necessary, because just because the players came upon a encampment of ogres didn't mean a fight was going to ensue. Those ogres may be on a mission. The ogres may have captured innocents. They may be divvying up treasure. They may have just killed a wild boar and they're eating it. They could be sleeping or playing a card game. Funny things, right? And that interaction may be, maybe the ogres don't think much of the player characters. Oh, we could defeat these guys, whatever, go away. Maybe the ogres are rude, or they want to play a couple of hands of 3-card dragon, Monty or whatever. Maybe they want to hear some stories or singing, or they want to drink and party with the players to rob them later. It was always a different context. And I think context is missing from modern gaming, but was very emphasized in the OSR. Every encounter wasn't a combat encounter, even if every encounter was with monsters and NPCs. Maybe the players are surrounded by hungry wolves and they leave their food behind, and that's how they solve the situation. Because there's an old video, we talked about XP for gold, because wandering monsters and traveling monsters, and when I say monsters, it could be wild animals, it could be sentient creatures and such. They didn't carry around all their treasure and their good stuff with them, so it was a detriment to getting into random fights. So parlaying, begging, tricking, using illusions, like I wrote down below, decoys, carousing, just stealthily hiding from monsters was a good thing to do. And oftentimes, parlaying with monsters gave you information about the very next thing. You were rewarded for gaining more knowledge about the world, very, very much for the next encounter. Now, it could be possible those same ogres you had a card game with and left behind, they may reinforce the bad guy later on. Who knows? They may spread rumors about the players later on. Sure, that future threat was a thing that happened in the OSR. It wasn't just, oh, we're going to bribe the ogres and leave, and then the ogres never returned. Player actions in the past had an effect on the future, which brings me up to situations that cannot be resolved. So where the players it is impossible for the players to move past this particular thing. Now, this did happen in many puzzle games and video games where, let me pull something very simple. I was going to say Legend of Zelda, but let me pull something simple. So, in a science fiction game, maybe there's doors that have color codes, that are color-coded doors. So you have a little blinking box next to the door to open up the door, and there's a blinking box that's red or yellow or green or blue or black. And in order to pass through that door, you need that color code card. So you would find soldiers or robots or aliens or a locker, or you would check in an HVAC system, or you look under a bed and you would find a code card in it. The code would be orange, and you put the card into your pocket, into your inventory, and you come upon a door that says orange. You open up the orange door. Well, in the OSR, sometimes you go through an adventure and you get to a locked door, and there isn't a key to be found. It doesn't matter how much you wedge or pull or cast a spell or something, you can't open the door. And it was the impossibility of it wasn't yes, it was to frustrate players so that they could be creative. Maybe they need to look for a key. They missed something. Someone somewhere, or there's a place where there's a key. So it engenders the players to go backwards to acts previously. Oh, that ogre that had a key around his neck, that should have been described by the game master, by the way. Maybe we need to figure out a way to get that key back. Or we didn't look under the bed or behind that tapestry or in the dresser because we were trying to move ahead very quickly, avoiding wandering monsters rolls, right? Maybe we need to go back, and maybe there's a key hanging there. Players in a starship get into a fight, and the game master describes how a footlocker spilled open and had key cards in there, and the players are just like, whatever, get the ammo, let's keep going. And then they realize, wait a minute, there were like 3 key cards in there, an orange one, a blue one, and a purple one. We should have picked those up. Let's go back and get them. And so it was necessary to pay attention to things, even innocuous things like an old note in a diary, a medallion, a small charm or something like that. And players used to pocket all those things because later on, maybe that small medallion was players didn't know this when they picked it up, but then they realized it is a royal emblem. And when they come upon other royal guards and they show that they have one of these, the royal guard looks at them and goes, okay, I'll let you pass. And the PC's like, maybe this is what's carried by assassins or spies, and they show this to the nobility so they can pass through the gates or something, right? And they didn't know this, but now they're finding this out about the world. Now, what I believe is lost in modern gaming is the fact that is context, that every encounter doesn't need to be with monsters, but even if they are with enemies or adversaries, let's say, to add in the context of why they're there. The scouting group that comes upon the player characters probably doesn't want to fight the player characters. They probably want to get back to who gave them orders to tell them about the player characters are here. Hey, the orcs are scouting, so maybe they should be scouting. And they run away from the players, and the players are like, wait a minute, where are they going? And like, you don't know. And the players are like, maybe they're a scouting party. It is finding out more information and engaging with the game as they maybe chase down the ogres. Or they could just ignore them and find out that later on, yeah, it was a raiding party that was ahead. And those 5 orcs they let go because it was useless to fight them, when there's a raiding party of 50 or more, because there's like a war band coming forward, they go, oh, we should have paid attention to that. Also, the idea of, in the OSR, about no balance is that sometimes monsters were so powerful that they didn't even consider murder killing the players for any reason. They would use player characters or ignore them or hire them or parlay with them, or in a way play with them like a cat and a mouse, right? Telling them stories or making them solve riddles, or threatening them and saying, hey, I'll let you live if each of you gives me your most valuable memory. Things of that nature. And sometimes those powerful entities weren't interested in a fight because they were doing other things, right? Sometimes a room was protected by a series of stone statues that the players do not have a magic weapon or ability to get past these stone statues. They're just too tough. But the stone statues don't chase the players. They kick them out the room, grab them by the ankles, throw them out the room, close the doors, and they go back to their pedestals. And the PCs are like, how do we get past these stone statues? We can't hurt them. They're too tough. There's too many of them. And someone realizes, well, remember that medallion we found? And they have the same emblem on their chest. Maybe we can show it to them, and maybe it will make them, return back to their immobile self or something like that. So there were puzzles, tricks, methods to navigate the world in the OSR that were allowed to solve a situation. And one thing I want to include in this, and this is very common in role-playing games, although it has been included, and I'll show you a document where it's called an old school primer. Got it from friendorfoe.com. I'll even put I'll put the link in here. Let's see, copy here before I post it up here. And it talks about not having game balance, and that's the fact that role playing is basically a conversation. And the rules should only interrupt when there's a chance, when there's a randomizer, a chance of neither the game master, dungeon master, flame tender, storyteller, warden, whatever, or the players know the outcome of what's going to happen. And that's when the rules invade. But role playing is just a conversation. It's the cyclical conversation I mentioned the other days, that game master comes up with situation, tells the players get together, they choose how they want to interact with the situation presented before them. Game Master then describes, after they take their actions, how that situation changes, gives them the situation back to them, and it goes back and forth. Hey, you see an undisturbed room. Players go, well, we take our light sources and look around the room. Okay, you step into the room and you see cobwebs and blah blah blah. And there's a description. The players say, all right, well, I'm going to use my 10-foot pole and lift up the tapestry that's hanging on the wall. Another player says, I'm going to move the bed aside and see if there's a trap door under the carpet or something. Another one says, hey, I'm going to look in the jewel box that's on the dresser, and there's a mirror there, whatever. And that discussion happens back and forth until a sound is heard. Someone finds something, whatever. A player wants to use one of their investigative or perception type of capabilities, and then we roll dice. And only then does the game master elicit, you need to grab dice to roll a thing because the thing's about to happen. Today, we've accepted the fact that players grab dice and start making rolls that game masters need to accept. And I contend that that's the wrong way to do a thing, because sometimes die rolls aren't necessary to accomplish the goal. I often bring up the idea of the character with the street urchin background type of thing notices the other pickpockets in town. Maybe you don't need to roll a perception check, right? Like that's the purview of the specialty or the expertise of that player. The wizard that goes to the library and the librarian there is like, you know what you're talking about. Let me lead you to the book you need to find. Did we really need to make that roll? Well, probably not, because we need the players to find the old tome in the ancient library. So why bother making a roll if it's necessary to give that information to the players to make the story move forward? So, impossible odds was a thing. Now, the other direction of that was also a common thing in the OSR, and the players themselves, like me describing what the game master does, the players themselves would have different interactions based on their own context. So when the players are first, second, third level and they come upon the orc band, okay, maybe there might be some evenly matched kind of thing where they really don't want to get in a fight. But when the players get to 7th, 8th, 10th level and they find those same orc scouts, spies, raiders or something, the pleasies know they can wipe the floor with the orcs. They might even just demonstrate one ability without getting in a fight to say, yeah, we can wipe our ass with you guys. Here's what you're going to do, right? And the threat can just make them run away. The players can maybe interrogate them or whatever, because the players realize it's not even worth it to fight them, because A, we're not going to get any experience points for it. They're not carrying any treasure, but we sure could use some allies, or we can use some cannon fodder, some meat shields, or some information, etc., etc. So a lot of times the players themselves would change the context of the encounter simply by their power levels. But this requires a dungeon master, game master, to understand, to give the players the potential to get all the information they need. So if the players round the corner, and this is really dumb, if players round the corner and fall upon roll dice, 2d12 orc raiders, and it's just turn corner, that's where they are, roll initiative, that's not only poor management, but not very immersive. In many ways, the dangers had to be foreshadowed to the players in as many possible ways. Sometimes you had to hit them over the head with the clue stick, but game masters giving players enough knowledge about what the dangers were ahead was very important. Unfortunately, there is a propensity today to go, well, those dangers are just fluff, it's just story elements. We are big damn heroes. There's no need for us to run because those dangers were for normies and we're better than that. Old school gaming was very much Zero to Hero. Modern gaming makes characters very much superheroes in the very early stages, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as that's the kind of game you want to play. But the OSR really challenged individuals to be creative in terms of their encounter abilities. So I'm going to show you guys a document here, and this is a primer. As it closes down, this is a primer for old school gaming. This is from a site known as Friend or Foe, and it just talks about, this primer talks about prepping players for what old school gaming entails. And I'm going to casually move down here to, guys having to hear this clicking. It's not letting me do it. So I'm going to page down, and this is sorry, let me give the credit where credit is due. It's by Matt Finch and Mythmere Games, copyright 2008, Swords and Wizardry, and is a trademark of Matt Finch. So this is where this comes from. This is a PDF, and it talks about old school gaming, and talks about like Zen moments and things of that nature, and some, we're not going to go too deep into this, but I did want to describe some of these to you. So like rulings not rules is one mantra, pit trap idea, and there's even I was going to read this out, maybe I'll come back to it, and it describes how old school gaming and new school, modern gaming versus the old school gaming, had the back and forth in terms of navigating the world. Maybe I'll do that at the very end. But anyway, it's so funny. The second Zen moment is player skill, not character abilities. This one I do have some contention with. I do feel like, and this was mentioned by an individual that posted a comment, and I tend to agree that character choices should matter, which is why I always take presumed professionalism when it comes to player character choices. If your character, you picked skills with stealth and acrobatics and sneaking and deception, then I'm going to assume within this game world you are a professional with those capabilities. So it's not that I don't want you to roll dice, but it may not be necessary to move the story forward because your character specifically has expertise with those things, right? It's the classic, hey, if I was a sniper and laying an ambush, I would go up on that ridge. Therefore, the player knows that the enemy is probably up on the ridge because they themselves would probably encamp themselves on the ridge. Player characters sneak up on the ridge. Guess what? They find the enemy. Now, the enemy could have been trying to cover themselves and use camouflage and sneak around, but I am presuming that player who has that talent could pierce that camouflage simply by just their own capabilities. And it's the same thing here. Now, with this, a lot of times it's about player skill, not character abilities. So instead of looking down at your character sheet, it was players getting together, huddling together to figure their way out of a situation. That can be a little bit daunting because every person is different. But if I'm playing a charismatic character and I have zero charisma myself, I shouldn't be punished because I'm not charismatic and I can't speak in front of a bunch of strangers when I'm role-playing, and it makes me nervous. But my character might be very bold and forthright and confident and a great public speaker. So just like I don't need to bench press 350 pounds, but my character can. I feel like character abilities should count towards successes, which is where the numbers, the mechanics come in, after the player describes what they're trying to do. Oops, sorry. third Zen moment that this Matt Finch says is heroic, not superhero, and talks about like character capabilities. One of the things, maybe we'll talk about this tomorrow, about the move away from magic items into character levels meant that the need to go out to find these special objects that would help you overcome certain obstacles aren't needed, because you just had them in your character, and then you could keep hitting the spam button to use them over and over again. Let's see here. Oops, my chat hasn't moved. Okay, so allow me to read this to go in length about this. So this talks about forgetting game balance. It literally says, fourth Zen moment, forget game balance. The old style campaign is with Fantasy World. The old style campaign is with Fantasy World, with all its perils, contradictions, and surprises. It's not a game setting which somehow always produces challenges of just the right difficulty for the party's level of experience. The party has no right only to encounter monsters they can defeat, no right only to encounter traps they can disarm, no right to invoke a particular rule from the books, and no right to a die roll in every particular circumstance. This sort of situation isn't a mistake in the rules. Game balance just isn't terribly important in old style gaming. It's not a tournament where the players are against the GM. It's more like a story with dice. The players describe their actions, the referee describes the results, and the story of the characters, epic or disastrous, grows out of the combined efforts of referee and players. The referee will just be as surprised by the results as the players are. The rules aren't fragile, and the game doesn't collapse if someone makes a little mistake, or one character is temporarily more powerful than the others, or an encounter is too hard. Sometimes the referee will make a bad call. These aren't tragedies. A role-playing game is like the internet. It doesn't break if you push the wrong buttons. Game balance just isn't a critical matter. One last point about game balance, though. Just as the players have no right to depend upon a rule in the book, the referee has no right ever to tell the player what a character decides to do. That's the player's decision, unless there's a charm spell going. Sure, they're being sarcastic. The referee in an old-style game has much more power than in a modern game, and may become tempted to dictate what characters are doing as well. If this happens, the whole game becomes nothing more than a guy telling a story while others roll dice. Just with a modern style game, this sort of behavior severely damages the fun of the game. Don't make chess moves for your opponents in a game of chess, and the referee doesn't play the characters in Zero Edition, or modern games for that matter. So, this was just one part of a whole, that game balance isn't about the numbers specifically. It is about taking advantage of the fact that this is a role-playing game, that we are in a game where we can make this world alive the way we want to bring the world alive. And that means that sometimes adversaries and enemies could be doing things that we aren't expecting, and that could surprise us and give us more information. And sometimes that information is a reward unto itself to let us know about further dangers going on. Also, players having the ability to be effective in solving a problem. Now, combat itself is a problem to be solved. Oftentimes it's solved by the numbers that the player has. How much damage can I deal? How much less damage can I take to defeat the enemy? That's a problem, and that's how it's solved. But in the OSR, oftentimes threats and intimidation are just as effective. So, for example, if my fighter can kill an ogre in one round of combat, 1, 2, 3 strike, dead, 1, 2, 3 strike in the second round, dead. There's 6 ogres, 6 rounds, boom, I can take care of them. But what if you have a player that can threaten and intimidate, cajole, or distract, or use an illusion or something on all 6 ogres at the same time? That means that they are even more effective than the fighter, even if the ogres don't die. They said something to one of the ogres that made this ogre skin turn pale, and he tells his buddies and he huddle together and they run off. And it might be like a Superman Batman situation where everyone's like, what did Batman say to the bad guy? And Superman's like, you don't want to know. Right? Because Batman just whispers something in the person's ear and the person just gives up the goods, right? Yeah. Is Batman more powerful than Superman in that situation? No, but probably more effective. And the same goes for the OSR, that maybe players make, along with player ingenuity. Many times players had powerful, easy to use things to get past a problem, but oftentimes that resource was very limited, maybe even a single use. So an example would be a character may have that medallion that lets them get past the guards, okay? And they show the medallion to get past the guards, but it's not going to fool them later on. Maybe it's a one-shot deal. And players knew that they had these resources in the OSR, that, yes, I have a small MacGuffin, a little magic item, a trinket or something that lets me teleport from one side of the crevice to the other, but if I use it, it's probably one and done. Or maybe a little too dangerous to use over and over again. And that was very common. And I says, but do they have a right to realize that is the case? I would say yes. You are correct. So thank you very much for, you guys are so smart. You're mentioning like, do they have a right to realize that's the case? Meaning like, and I did mention this just earlier, that in modern games, a lot of times we're relying on the rule first before the narrative, but the narrative was very important. In other words, in OSR gaming, it is incumbent upon me, if I'm the dungeon master, to give the players as much information as possible, including how dangerous something is. And oftentimes I would relate that danger to player character capabilities. So what do I mean by that? Player character Fightor. I like to pick with Fightor. So Fightor stumbles out of a tavern, doesn't have his weapon, doesn't have his armor, he's got a dagger maybe on his belt, stumbles out drunk, and is surrounded by thugs. Now, as a game master, it is important for me to describe how dangerous the situation is. So if Fightor is probably first, second, third level, I may describe the situation as, yeah, you're surrounded by some very dangerous thugs. Now remind you, this is me game mastering. I know the thugs' capabilities, and I'm not going to change their capabilities. What I will change the description based on the player's ability. So if the player is very low level, I'm going to describe it as very dangerous. You're surrounded by a bunch of thugs. You understand. You're a little inebriated. You unconsciously feel to your hip. Your sword is nowhere to be found. They are threatening you. They're saying something about, through the haze of the alcohol, they're asking for your gold and whose crest do you wear upon your outfit or something. And I'm going to tell them, because the player may go, well, I'm just going to grab my dagger and attack or something. I'm going to let them know, listen, letting you know you're surrounded by like 5 thugs. This isn't looking good for you. You've been in fights before, and 5-on-1 fight with you is not looking good. Now, let's say fight towards like 7th level. I may go, this is probably an even fight for you. It's up to you whether you think it's worth it to have a fight or just toss the gold and be done, right? If fight towards like 11th level, 12th level, I'm like, these are ass wipes. Like, they're threatening you, they think they're badasses, but whatever. You've got like 67 hit points, which represents to me your ability to like dodge, move, survive, evade, endure their measly old attacks and stuff with clubs and rusty knives or whatever. So it is incumbent upon us as dungeon masters to give the players as much information as they realize. So that's a really good comment there, because I think in modern gaming sometimes we wait for the player to say make a roll. I make a perception check, and based on that check, the game master says, "Well, here's what's going on." Or sometimes we've even had situations where a dungeon master will say, "You turn the corner and there are, I don't know, 3 ogres," with zero context. Like, are there 3 ogres and we fought ogres before? Are there 3 ogres that look tough and mean and look like they can wipe the floor with us? Professionalism, right? Me, the player, may not know this, but your character has heard about these ogres before, and you've heard how fearsome they are, but you as a player, your character, you're like, no, right now I'm feeling pretty good. Like, I feel like I can beat ass with these guys, right? Because as a character, you may know this, right? It's the classic hairs on the back of the neck thing that happens to people that go, yeah, I got this, right? I'm going to relate this to dating, okay? I know this is strange. Sometimes one or both people in a date know that the date's going well. You can't put your finger on it, but the words being spoken, the body language, the interaction, the synergy, one or both individuals in a date may say, I'm feeling pretty good about this, and I know it's going well. Whereas another time someone says, I'm feeling awkward and I know I'm not getting anywhere. Do I want to and like a player in a combat, do I want to even keep this going, or maybe I should just bow out? I know it's embarrassing to just be like, yeah, this isn't working, but do I really want to waste another hour and a half in awkward moments? Yeah, this person just isn't. Oh, they smoke. Oh, I didn't even realize that. The smoking's not my thing, or I don't know why their laugh is bothering me, or boy, this person just isn't a conversationalist. I ask them things, they give me one-word answers. I'm trying to find out more information about them. And the same, I think, goes for dungeon mastering and player interaction. We want to drop as many clues and smack players over the head with as many clues as we can. Sometimes we can just stop and say it out of game and go, no, your player knows you're surrounded. You don't see the thugs, but you know it. Right? If this was you and you saw like one thug in front of you and one behind you, you're like, yeah, they wouldn't step up to a guy like me like that. There's probably others in the shadows. Things like that. And so I think that is a very good, insightful comment. You guys are I'm thankful that you guys, having very few characters to type your comments, reduce something down to a very great comment. So I'm going to read to you 2 separate pit trap encounters. This is from Matt Finch's primer for old school gaming, and it tells you the difference between the OSR and modern gaming, and it also describes it tangentially about game balance and how that balance is resolved from simply just having a back and forth. So here's a pit trap for the modern style. Okay, let's see what this is. So the GM says, a 10-foot wide corridor leads north into the darkness. The other character is John the Rogue. The Rogue says, I check for traps. GM, what's your target number for checking? Rogue, 15. GM decides that the pit trap in front of the party is standard, so all John has to do is roll a 15 or better. Roll a d20. Rogue, 16. GM, probing ahead of you, you find a thin crack in the floor. It looks like there's a pit trap. Rogue, can I disarm it? GM, what's your target number for that? Rogue, 12. I rolled a 14. GM, okay, moving carefully, you're able to jam the mechanism so the trap won't open. Rogue, we walk across, I go first. All right, that's modern style of interaction. There's nothing wrong with that, That just happens to be a current style of doing the thing. Hey, what's your number? Oh, I checked for this. Okay, what was your number for this? Okay, I do that. Now, in some ways, from that first interaction, you can kind of see how numbers came first, the rules came first, or there was a minimal interaction. But here's one where you're not even going to have many die rolls, if any. So here's old school pit trap. All right, GM, a 10-foot wide corridor leads north into the darkness. The rogue, or the roguish character, because they said roguish because back then it was called the thief. But anyway, so the rogue says, we move forward, poking the floor ahead with our 10-foot pole. Classic 10-foot pole. Anyway, GM says, the GM is about to say that the pole pushes open a pit trap when he remembers something. Wait, you don't have the 10-foot pole anymore. You fed it to the stone idol. He says, if the party still had the pole, John would have detected the trap automatically. The rogue says, I didn't feed it to the idol. The idol ate it when I poked its head. GM, that doesn't mean you have the pole back. You go into the corridor? The rogue, no, I'm suspicious. Can I see any cracks in the floor, maybe shaped in a square? GM mulls this over because there's a pit trap right where John is looking. But it's dark, so... No, there are about 1 million cracks in the floor. You won't see a pit trap that easily anyway. A different referee might absolutely decide John sees the trap since he's looking in the right place for the right thing. Which I would default to. But anyway, this is different. So the rogue says, okay, I take out my water skin from my backpack and I'm going to pour some water onto the floor. Does it trickle through the floor anywhere or reveal some kind of pattern? The GM, yeah, the water seems to be puddling a little bit around a square shape in the floor where the square is a little higher than the rest of the floor. The rogue, like there's a covered pit trap? GM, could be. The rogue, can I disarm it? GM, how? The rogue, I don't know, maybe make a die roll to jam the mechanism? The GM, you can't see a mechanism. You step on it, there's a hinge, you fall. What are you going to jam? The rogue, I don't know. Okay, let's just walk around it. GM, you walk around it then. There's about a 2-foot clearance on each side. Now, I get I do feel like that back and forth, and I think there was a point in that little back and forth for that example. The back and forth was like, hey, I want to do a thing, and the game master's trying to figure out, well, what are you doing? Right? Not what die roll are you going to make. Like, I want to jam the pit trap. Well, how? What are you using? Tell me how you're doing it. No die roll was necessary to do the thing, to get the thing done. It was, hey, I'm checking, I'm looking, I pull my water skin out, I pour the water, there's a thing and there's a pit trap. But if you tell me what you're doing first, it may not trigger rolls of the dice. It might just be that you just succeed in the thing, in encountering the thing. And even when it comes to dungeon encounters and enemy encounters and things like that, does it immediately have to go to roll initiative? Maybe not. Maybe, just maybe, the point is for, here's the situation. The game master comes up with a situation, dungeon master creates a situation. It's up to you as a player or players to engage in that situation in whatever way. Hey, that party of ogres, do you come stumbling in pretending you're drunk and pour them all drink knowing that it's going to put them to sleep? Why the hell not? Right? And you don't know unless you try. And maybe the most charismatic member, maybe the one that's the least charismatic, is the one that appeals to the ogres who are like, yeah, let's have a party. Let's get this party started, right? Let's get this party started quickly, right? Set it off, I'll suggest y'all. Anyway, but you get the point. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for letting me express this small element of why I think there's a desire for OSR style gaming in which it is about us interacting back and forth. And yeah, we're going to use rules, and we don't even really need to use too many rulings if our gaming engine works. D20s, dice pool, 2d6, 3d6 systems, 2d10 systems, doesn't matter. Whatever our dice mechanic is, we can default to that, sure. But really what we're trying to do is have some great encounters with some creative feedback, some interesting ways to get around it. And it's a shame too, because in modern gaming, it is an accepted practice that if you do anything other than kill the monster, you don't get the reward for it. And in old school gaming, and actually it's not really old school gaming, it's actually how experience points were given. Encounters were given, you were given experience points if you survived the encounter. Now, if that meant getting drunk with ogres and moving on, you got the experience points for that. Did you defeat the ogres? Well, no, but you survived the encounter. You literally had experience encountering ogres. That's what experience was. Experience doesn't necessarily mean killing. Experience is having experience with that thing. And so many people like myself like to go on vacations and we experience a new thing. That's experience. It doesn't mean that it was death defying. It could be. And maybe those ogres could have got pissed off at getting drunk. Maybe there was a chance that it would affect their reaction roll or morale roll or something like that. But reaction rolls were necessary, from friendly to cooperative to unfriendly to combative to aggressive. Those reaction rolls existed so that it gave the players at least a small opportunity, even if it was random, to say, hey, listen, vampires who are in league with the vampire lord, you don't need to murder kill us and drain our blood. Maybe you should let us pass by, or even escort us to your vampire overlord because we have something important to tell him, right? And did it mean that they had to kill the vampire spawn? No. Does it also mean that they have to think like, oh man, we're going to be surrounded by maybe the vampire lord and his spawn when we get to the lair? Sure. But maybe they come up with another idea to go, hey, I gotta go to the bathroom. I'm going to step off to the left, right? And then disappear or something to get out of the situation. That's where players become very creative. So thank you very much for being part of the show. Thank you very much for allowing me to express what I believe is a draw towards OSR gaming. And I'm not saying one's good or bad. Yes, I am someone who loves OSR gaming, but I only do so because of my relationship with modern gaming as well. And there's a place for all of that. It's not for everybody. No big deal. But maybe you guys might find it a bit interesting. So guys, thank you very much for being part of the show. Thank you very much for taking part in the show afterwards as well. If you got any comments, ideas, questions, or whatnot, I continue to want to make plans to engage with the community a little bit more, maybe Discord, other live streams and things like that. But I like these longer talks because I feel that these longer talks allow us to have a longer, more discerning conversation than just sound bites. And I think all of you, although this community isn't large over here in this corner of the interwebs, I think these are where the brilliant people like to reside, like yourself. So thank you very much for spending your valuable time. I hope as you purchase your time with me, that I can make change for you back for your tabletop role-playing experience, and hell, just maybe your experience during the day. Guys, thank you very much. Have a great one. I will see thee later. Peace and tranquility. Bye.